They meet, they talk, they share, and I cook a 3-course vegetarian meal for them. So they leave with a full stomach, with a nice healthy meal to go with it. And they share their experiences. This coming week, we ask each elder to come up with a very profound proverb, a very profound statement, something that makes sense to them, and submit them to the circle of interdependence. And we're going to create a book that's Proverbs by the elders. So they continue to grow and develop in spite of their age. They're growing. And we tell the children, you may walk faster than me. You may run faster than me, but we know the way. That's what the elders tell them, you know. And it's a wonderful experience. We have a summer program where the children are there all day, 5 days a week, from morning till evening, learning, experiencing, teaching, going through exercises, and eating, and doing all the things that children love to do. That's during the summertime. And then, of course, we have an attorney that comes and gives people legal advice every Saturday. He volunteers his time to do that. And then, of course, we have grieving mothers who lost a child doing some violence in the community. Those mothers meet every Saturday. They meet, they talk, they share, and they pray. That's every Saturday. We have just so many things that go on. We have an incubator. We have a restaurant in shape. Some people do not have the money to start their own business or even the experience. So we allow them to come into the restaurant and allow them to afford to be there a period of time, cook their own food, share it with the community, and build that clientele up through social media so that they can get out and start their own business somewhere else. But they cannot afford to do it given all the expenses that they have to incur in operating a restaurant, from the grease trap, the employees, the utilities, all the things that you have to do. But they don't have that. But after a year or two, they have a clientele, they have the experience, and they have the food to be able to do that. And we've had 4 groups to do that over the past years. We have so many things that go on at Shape Center. And some people want to do something. They don't have the space to do it, so we allow them to do it at Shape. We cannot do everything, but we can share our space so you can do what needs to be done. There's a group called PBMA, Positive Black Male Association. A young man was a little boy coming to Shape Center. He went to TSU, graduated, got in some trouble, ended up in prison. He got out and came right back to Shape Center. And we met with him. He showed me a little program that he had. He wanted to start a program at Shape. He didn't have a building, but he wanted to start one. So I met with him. It's been 4 years ago. Now he has PBMA, Positive Black Male Association. And it's growing and glowing. And it's a wonderful program. Like I said, a lot of people don't have the resources to do what needs to be done. And we can't do it because we don't have the knowledge, the wisdom, or the understanding to do it. So we share our space for them to be able to do it. Every third Monday, we have what's called young people who are homeless and have other problems. They're able to come to Shape. We give them a free, healthy meal. We give them a haircut if they choose to get one. We have a little hotel in the back that they let us use the hotel to do showers. They get able to take a shower. We give them a good healthy meal. What else? Shower. Oh, a $25 gift certificate. So when they leave Shape, they feel good about themselves. And that's once a month we do that. And you don't have to be homeless. You can just be having a rough time and need a place to do that at, where they can come to Shape. Oh, we also give them clean clothing. That's every month. And that's just a little bit of what we do. A lot of you might know Trey Legal. He plays the cello. He's he comes to SHAPE. Death penalty abolition movement meets at SHAPE Center every month. And they meet and talk about what has to be done relative to their organization. It's so much that goes, and I'm just giving you a little bit. I'm not going to talk about everything. Just a little bit about what we do at SHAPE. And again, it's been almost 54 years. And I'll be celebrating my 75th anniversary right along that same time. You know, and my son is enjoying his life in Australia right now. So we talk on the phone every night. And so I'm enjoying my life. I love being at SHAPE, and I look forward to the opportunity to come here. And I'm gonna have to do it more than just once a year, because I get a good feeling when I sit here. Probably the few times I get a chance to breathe, you know. And by the way, we have a breathing exercise for the elders also. There's a young lady that comes and show them how to breathe. And that's important, because at 102, you need to know how to breathe. So that's just a taste of what's happening at SHAPE. And again, it's a whole lot more than what I've said. Oh, Cocaine Anonymous. There are people that come at meeting at SHAPE right now who've been addicted to drugs, but they come every Saturday and Sunday, and they go to have their meetings every Saturday and Sunday. So again, we can't do everything, but if everybody would do something, everything will get done. Thank you very much, okay?
Those in our sanctuary will find the instructions for text giving in the order of service, and those watching the live stream will see the instructions on your screen. Our regular Sunday morning offering collection invites us to weave a tapestry of love and action. We ask you to give generously. An offering will now be generously received.
Please join with me in the words to dedicate our offering found in your pew card. To the work of this church, which is weaving a tapestry of love and action, we dedicate our lives, and these are our offerings.
Unitarian Universalist congregations together affirm and promote 7 principles. We also share a living tradition of wisdom and spirituality drawn from many sources. The 7 principles and 6 sources of the Unitarian Universalist Association grew out of the grassroots of our communities, were affirmed democratically, and are a part of who we are. So if you will look on your insert, I invite you to recite with me the 7 principles. The inherent worth and dignity of every person, justice, equity, and compassion in human relations, acceptance of one another and encouragement to spiritual growth in our congregations, a free and responsible search for truth and meaning, the right of conscience and the use of the democratic process within our congregations and in society at large, the goal of world community with peace, liberty, and justice for all, and respect for the interdependent web of all existence of which we are a part. Now, Unitarian Universalist congregations have recently begun considering adopting an eighth principle in order to be more intentional about dealing with racism and other oppressions at the systemic level. The eighth principle came from a feeling that we need something to renew our commitment to this work, to hold ourselves accountable, and to fulfill the potential of our existing principles. So please recite with me the proposed eighth principle. Journeying toward spiritual wholeness by working to build a diverse, multicultural, beloved community by our actions that accountably dismantle racism and other oppressions in ourselves and our institutions. Thank you.
I invite you to take out your gray hymnals and turn to hymn 311, Let It Be a Dance. Please rise and join me in body and or in spirit as we sing, Let It Be a Dance. Let it be a dance we do. May I have this dance with you through the good times and the bad times too. Let it be a dance. Let a dancing song be heard. Play the music, say the words, and fill the sky with sailing birds. Let it be a dance. Let it be a dance. Let it be a dance. Learn to follow, learn to lead. Feel the rhythm, feel the need. To reap the harvest, plant the seed. Let it be a dance. Let it be a dance we do. May I have this dance with you through the good times and the bad times too. Let it be a dance. Everybody turn and spin. Let your body learn to bend. And like a willow with the wind, let it be a dance. Let it be a dance. Let it be a dance. A child is born, the old must die. A time for joy, a time to cry. Take it as it passes by. Let it be a dance. Let it be a dance we do. May I have this dance with you through the good times and the bad times too. Let it be a dance. Morning star comes out at night. Without the dark there is no light. If nothing's wrong, then nothing's right. Let it be a dance. Let it be a dance. Let it be a dance. Let the sunshine, let it rain. Share the laughter, bear the pain. And round we go again. Let it be a dance.
Those of you who are parents, grandparents, have children, or once were children, which is to say all of us, probably have some familiarity with what I like to call the I don't want tos. Recall a scenario like this. It's morning, you're helping a child get ready for school. The child likes school. They have friends who they are eager to see. You've made some breakfast. Maybe it's something simple like cinnamon toast, or maybe it's a special occasion. And so, like we have in my house on such moments, there are pancakes. Doesn't really matter. There's exciting chatter about the day. And then when it comes time to put on shoes and head out the door, I don't want to. I hate school. What it seemed like it was going to be an easy, even, dare I say, pleasant morning, has suddenly been transformed into an epic battle. There is the gnashing of teeth, the rending of garments, and then finally, you and the child are out the door, leave the house, and it's not so bad. They don't hate school after all. The I don't want tos are a reaction to change. When we're little, we humans tend to hate change. The moments of transition, the ordinary moments of transition, are often some of the most difficult moments of parenting. Actually, if we're honest, it's probably true that transitions are some of the hardest parts of life. One of the reasons we humans have created religious communities is to help us manage the big moments of transition in our lives. It's often that the only experience that many people have of church or another religious community is at those moments of transition, when it comes time to dedicate a child or celebrate a wedding or mourn the passing of a loved one. It seems that ritual provides us comfort when we are trying to navigate such significant events. They offer us a feeling of structure, of continuity, a reminder that though our individual lives might be unique, the experiences we have are shared by everybody. It's like we sang in our earlier hymn, "A child is born, the old must die. A time for joy, a time to cry." It is the repetition of ritual that helps ease change. A new life has come amongst us. It will be unlike any life that has ever been before. And yet, with so much unknown, we know this: there is a way to welcome this new being into our community. A life has been lost. A vibrant soul is no longer amongst us, has gone to join the ancestors, has become a blessed memory. And yet with so much loss, we come together to share, to reflect, to remind each other that especially when we mourn, we are never truly alone. You probably learned something about this actually when dealing with the I don't want tos. And helping the child out the door, whether the child was you or whether you were the parent, you probably figured out that a certain ritual of some kind helped with that transition from breakfast to school. Maybe it was a silly song or a particular order that you put on coats and boots. The important thing is that both daily life and when confronted with the biggest shifts that we experience, ritual provides us a sense of stability, routine, and meaning. I mention all of this because the Unitarian Universalist Association is undergoing the process of a consequential change. Right now, we're considering rewriting Article 2 of the association's bylaws. Now, this might seem like an obtuse or bureaucratic or banal thing to discuss in a Sunday morning sermon, but it is actually of significant religious importance. For you see, Article 2 is where the principles and sources of the Unitarian Universalist Association reside. And for a lot of us, those statements, which we just read, reflect our common theology. And the proposed revisions to Article 2 are significant. They entirely replace the existing principles and sources with statements of values and covenant and inspiration. The eighth principle, which is under discussion as an addition to the current principles, will become its own section, revised into something called inclusion. The dramatic nature of the intended alterations of Article 2 has prompted a lot of reaction. People affiliated with our congregation have been emailing me or wanting to talk with me about them at the rate of at least once a week for the past month and a half or so. After I attended a session about Article 2 at the American Academy of Religion last autumn, I was inspired by the suggested changes to write the commissioners a 4-page letter of commentary. Some of you are opposed to the prospect of changing the principles at all. Others think that the new text is great. Most of my commentary about the new version of the article had to do with theological nuances, and if I shared them with you, they'd overtake the rest of this morning's sermon. But broadly speaking, I'm supportive of revising the Article 2, but I will admit that my first reaction was a bad case of the I don't want tos. The principles were rendered in their current form in 1987, which means that I grew up with them, and they're familiar and provide an easy introduction to Unitarian Universalism. So I'm not one who necessarily wants to let them go. There is, of course, a bit of irony here. Unitarian Universalism has a sort of contradiction at its heart. A core element of the tradition is its openness to change. Some of you might remember that I like to quote Joanne Braxton, Rebecca Parker, and others who have said that in our tradition we uphold that revelation is not sealed. Or alternatively, as the early 20th century Universalist L.B. Fisher put it when asked to define our faith, he wrote, "We do not defend any immovable theological position. We grow, as all living things must. The main question is, which way are we moving? Which way are we moving?" Here comes the contradiction. We are a tradition committed to change. Many religious traditions are just the opposite. They seek to preserve their patterns of belief and worship from generation to generation. Unitarian Universalism has long sought to adapt to the changing world. It's what scholars call a mediating tradition. It attempts to provide bridges between science and religion, past and present, the secular and the sacred, theological innovation and the security of continuity. The contradiction inherent in being such a mediating tradition is that we typically think of traditions as antithetical to change, and yet we are changing all the time. That's why we speak of our tradition as a living tradition. As the late Elandria Williams put it, if we believe in the promise of our faith, we must continue pushing forward, even if the reality of change makes us want to give up. Elandria was the co-moderator of the Unitarian Universalist Association, who, along with Barb Greer, their co-moderator, established a commission to study and probably revise Article 2. They believed that the nature of the Unitarian Universalist Association includes an openness to change. And a couple of years back, they began to consider changing the principles and sources. As I mentioned earlier, the current principles that we have only date to 1987. And their relatively contemporary language leads to an experience I sometimes have when meeting with new members of the congregation or visitors. It is witnessing a reaction of the surprise that many of them, or perhaps I should say many of you, have when they learn that Unitarian Universalism is in fact a venerable tradition with historical roots in dissenting Christianity. Oh, the vibrations. Oh, the Unitarians, apostate seminarians, grok the groovy. Why the consternation? Arise, ye antediluvians, groove on. Tom Wolfe's 1960s tongue-in-cheek description of Unitarian Universalism is typical of the impression that our religious communities came out of the hippie counterculture, or at the very most, they have their roots in the new religious movements of the late 19th century, like the Baha'i or Unity. In my conversations with new members, I offer a different perspective. I share that there are congregations affiliated with us on the Unitarian side that stretch back to the 16th century, and Universalist congregations that date to the ending years of the 18th century. And it's true that these communities were, at that time, Christian, but the earliest Unitarians in North America were covenantal, not creedal. And while in 1636 they could not imagine that any member of their community would ever be anything other than Christian, they differed significantly on what they understood Christianity to mean and what the nature of God, Jesus, and humanity was. Over time, these differences became great enough that some of them stopped identifying as Christian. They took up labels like transcendentalist and atheist, and widened their circles large enough to welcome people without roots in Christianity, so that our faith eventually became a pluralistic one, embracing people from Jewish, Muslim, Hindu, and many other traditions. The Universalists, for their part, believed in universal salvation. They held that God's love was all-encompassing, all-embracing, and all-powerful. Mark Morrison Reed has described how historically Universalism came to be described as the gospel of God's success. Picturesquely spoken, the image was that of the last unrepentant sinner being dragged kicking and screaming into heaven, unable to resist the power and love of the Almighty. Eventually, this emphasis on the overwhelming love of God led the Universalists, like the Unitarians, to stop worrying about whether someone was or was not Christian and become theologically pluralistic communities too. In the middle of the 20th century, the Unitarians and the Universalists had reached a point where they both recognized that ethical action was far more important than religious belief. And so in 1961, the American Unitarian Association and the Universalist Church of America underwent a consolidation. Now, many of you are likely familiar with this history. I offer it because some of you are new to the congregation, and it can be also helpful to have some perspective on Unitarian Universalism as we are considering changes. These changes over time have often been expressed in different historical statements of faith that Unitarian Universalist and Unitarian Universalist communities have made. The principles and sources are just the most recent of these. Some of the historical documents use language and theological concepts that many of you would find out of place in our congregation and perhaps might even make you wince. The 1605 Rakovian Catechism, an influential early text, describes the aim of religion as eternal life and spills a great deal of ink about the nature of the Christian faith and the office of Jesus Christ. The Salem Covenant of 1629 refers to a decision to bind ourselves together in God. And the Salem congregation, who we get much of our current practice of making covenants was so dissatisfied with that early text that only 7 years later they revised it again, a reminder that we are a living tradition and have long been one. In 1790, we can find yet another statement from the Universalists professing a deep sense of commitment to the unchangeable and universal love of God to mankind. In 1830, the deed of Adi Brahmo Samaj, our cousins in India, refers to a devotion to adoration of the eternal, unsearchable, immutable being who is the author and preserver of the universe. Well, you get the point. The point being that there have been so many different articulations of our faith tradition over time that that's part of the challenge of being a non-creedal tradition. All of these statements are ultimately insufficient. Unlike our cousins in creedal religions, we've long understood that whatever brings us together ultimately escapes language. Trinitarian Christians might believe that the verbal essence of their theological perspective can be captured in statements like the Nicene Creeds, but we do not. The intended revisions of Article 2, like their many predecessors, will be insufficient. They'll be insufficient because, as Teresa Soto has eloquently said, there is something between us that we cannot tame and cannot measure. My words, your words, our words, words of any kind will never capture the fullness of faith. Our faith, after all, is found more in the things we do together, is in the rituals we share, the attempts to make the world a better place that we collectively engage in together, than it is encapsulated in any statement, be it the current or future version of Article 2. Faith is caught up in all of the rituals that we share that help us make it through the inevitable I do not want tos of life, the big rites of passage, and the steady, simple act of gathering together on Sunday mornings. Whatever language we use, however we choose to speak of our living tradition, we will remain a congregation that assembles to widen the circle of love, bring more justice into the world, and accompany each other on life's journey. Over the next year, the Unitarian Universalist Association has invited all of us into a discussion about Article 2. Today, after the service, you can participate in such a discussion if you like in the fireside room, and we'll be hosting several others in the coming months. The association will be voting on the language of the article at this year's General Assembly, which is the annual gathering that assembles delegates from all of our congregations. And First Unitarian Universalist will be sending 7 delegates this year, and you'll have an opportunity to let those people know what you think after they've been selected by the board. The language in Article 2 can be revised. Public online conversations to foster the revision will be taking place in June. And whatever language these conversations ultimately settle on will be voted at this year's assembly and then reaffirmed at next year's assembly, which will give us a year to try out the language, see if we like it or prefer the old principles or something else, and reflect that we are a living tradition, one in which we change our understanding of what it means to be Unitarian Universalist from generation to generation. Whatever we place in Article 2 this time around can be changed and will be changed again. This is both the dynamism and contradiction at the heart of our movement. We are a tradition committed to change. We seek to preserve the unnameable something between us that we cannot tame and cannot measure. At the same time, we recognize that each generation will experience, understand, and attempt to name that unnameable source in its own language. Here then, I leave you this morning with a blessing, inspired by the essence of our living tradition. May we find in the work of this religious community inspiration to be open to change, and comfort in the steady rituals it offers. A reminder that though we cannot be fully named, that's something between us, that we might speak of it differently from generation to generation. It remains here in these sacred walls, a source of love and justice in our lives. That it might be so, I invite the congregation to say, Amen.
I invite you to take out your gray hymnals and turn to hymn 305, De Coloris. Please rise and join me in body or in spirit as we sing De Coloris, hymn 305.
Please join me in the words for extinguishing the chalice on the words printed on your laminated pew card. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.
For our benediction, I offer these words by Theodore Parker. Be ours a religion which, like sunshine, goes everywhere. Its temple, all space. Its shrine, the good heart. Its creed, all truth. Its ritual, works of love. Its profession of faith, divine living. Go in peace, go in love. May our lives be a blessing. Amen. Thank you so much for watching our service today. We're glad you're part of our online community, where we welcome people who are diverse in faith, ethnicity, history, as well as gender identity and sexual orientation. There are many different ways you can get involved in our community. One you can do right now is by clicking like below or subscribing to our channel. If you're interested in joining our congregation, please email us at membership@firstuuhouston.org. Thanks so much for joining us.